There's a strange stillness you feel, gazing at your own reflection after a long, quiet cry. Your features are puffy, your eyes glassy. But what truly grips you isn't the tiredness you see on the skin. It's a profound, disquieting sense that you're looking at a complete stranger. This isn't the version of you that you've worked to maintain, polish, or present. It's a spirit that has finally cracked its container, exposed and raw in the light of an undeniable new reality. There is no going back to the person you were. As the thinker Carl Jung suggested, the spirit yearns for wholeness, not for being perfect, not for external approval, but for a sense of being complete. It seeks a resonance between the person you show the world and the deep, true you. Yet, to even begin moving toward that wholeness, there is a stage you cannot skip, the stage of shattering. This is when the performances end. The easy laughs, the agreeable head tilts, all the moments you claimed you were fine while something inside of you fractured. Suddenly, all of it is too heavy, a costume too suffocating to wear another minute. You don't have the energy to act anymore. You don't have the desire to make others feel at ease. The need to be likable, suitable, or perfectly composed is gone. And in that raw state of fatigue, a new path opens. It isn't a path to becoming the woman everyone wants, but a journey toward becoming the woman you know you are. This is the core of what Jung described as individuation. It is when a human being starts to turn down the volume on the world's demands, to listen to the signal from within, to reconnect with who they are and reconstruct their life from the foundation up. It happens without an audience, without fanfare, but with a deep, powerful, and permanent shift. Number 1, the path to yourself, moving past the persona and into the shadow. So many women spend their whole existence chasing connection, yet never truly allowing themselves to be real in the process. They are celebrated for their adaptability, their warmth, their capacity to yield. But deep down, there is a quiet ache that goes unheard. Carl Gustav Jung noted, to accept oneself completely is the most terrifying thing. This isn't just some flowery idea. It is a siren call, a signal that cuts through the countless identities women have been handed down through history. From the well-behaved daughter who has mastered the art of the pleasant smile, to the passionate partner who intuits every need, to the ideal parent who sets her own needs aside. These roles aren't wrong in themselves, but when we inhabit them unconsciously, they become like a second skin that prevents the soul from breathing. In Jung's framework, these societal blueprints are known as archetypes, ancient patterns stored in our shared human memory. Figures like the mother, the innocent, the partner, and the nurturer act like internal guides to help us find our way. However, when a single archetype is emphasized, or becomes the only way a person defines herself, she loses her connection to her full self. A woman who only identifies as a devoted mother might forget that she's also a creative being, a partner, an adventurer. A woman trapped in the nice girl archetype often finds she cannot say no, cannot voice her dissatisfaction, and slowly, she loses her own voice within her own life. One of the surest indicators of this inner suffocation is that constant friction between your public face and your private feelings. Many women who are successful, cherished, and admired still confess to a quiet, lonely sense of being hollow, with no clear reason why. That is because what they are living out isn't their true nature, but their persona. It is the social identity that Jung identified as our tool for navigating and adapting to the world around us. This persona helps us belong, but if we wear it for too long, we can forget what our own face feels like underneath. And then one day, the shadow demands to be seen. Jung defined the shadow as all the rejected, disowned, and forbidden parts of our own spirit. It's the place where our untamed anger, our secret envy, our denied desires, and our fierce wildness reside. For women, this shadow is often filled with all the things we've been told are too intense, overly emotional, too ambitious, too headstrong, to be accepted. Countless women have learned to bury these parts of themselves until the pressure becomes too immense and it erupts as a life-altering event. This could manifest as a sudden depression, an unbearable friction in an otherwise happy relationship, or a collapse right after a major achievement, because, as Jung explained in Psychology and Alchemy, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. When the shadow remains in the dark, it pilots our lives without our consent. The authentic journey begins when a woman stops running from her shadow and instead starts a conversation with it. This is the moment she gives herself permission to experience anger without needing to apologize, to own her ambitions without shame, to say no, to not agree, to step away from the roles she thought were her unchangeable fate. A woman in the midst of this psychological awakening will face disorienting days. She is no longer the person she was, but she doesn't yet recognize who she is becoming. This is the liminal space of transformation, where masks are gone, relationships reconfigure, and her inner world feels like a chaotic building site. But it is precisely here that a new self draws its first breath. The truth is that the darkness isn't your opponent, it is your compass. As Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. It is by traveling into the very spaces we've been taught to fear, where we feel inadequate, hard to love, or too much, that we discover our own wholeness. And the magic is, when a woman finds the courage to embrace her shadow, she also accesses a powerful life current. She becomes more authentic, more grounded, more magnetic, and radiant in a way that cannot be taught or imitated. I remember a woman telling me her story. She was the perfect partner, always kind, always appropriate, always considerate of others. A sudden end to her relationship sent her into a tailspin and into counseling. During that process, she came face to face with a stark reality. She had never truly lived for her own sake. She began to keep a journal, to hike alone in nature, to take up art, to let herself scream, to let herself weep. At last she told me, "I have no idea who this person is, but she feels more real than I have in my entire life." That was her true being, so long concealed by the shadow, finally emerging, piece by piece. When a woman moves beyond her persona and shadow, she isn't creating a better version to make others happy. She isn't trying to match an ideal archetype. She is becoming herself. Unpolished, multifaceted, at times messy, but completely real. And that level of authenticity, once lived, radiates an energy that everyone around her registers. A silent, magnetic field. Not because she is without flaws, but because she is honest down to her core. In our world today, where profiles are carefully curated, feelings are filtered, and women are given endless rules on how to behave, this pilgrimage to face the shadow, drop the mask, and choose oneself is an act of quiet revolution. A woman brave enough to journey into her own darkness to find her light is changing not just her own existence, but the fabric of the world she touches. And perhaps that is the type of person everyone secretly wishes to be around. Not because she works hard to be loved, but because she has decided to love the truth of her own soul. Number 2, the awakening from wreckage to rebirth. And so, after the masks are dropped, after the shadow is met with a steady gaze instead of fear, a woman arrives at a new frontier. This isn't a place of instant tranquility, but a space filled with the debris of a former self quietly giving way. This is the phase Jung was always honest about, because the journey of individuation doesn't start from a place of ease. It starts from a point of crisis. The essential question then becomes, have you ever experienced a fall so total that it forced you to introduce yourself to yourself all over again? For so many women, a new beginning is sparked by a psychological tremor that feels like annihilation. A sudden separation, a harsh rejection after years of dedication, a deep betrayal from a trusted friend, or sometimes more softly, a morning where she opens her eyes and cannot imagine a single compelling reason to leave her bed. What felt like a simple mood touches something much deeper, a place where every identity, every belief, and every routine suddenly seems meaningless. In that shattering moment, when all the external scaffolding is gone, the innermost self begins to transmit its signal. As Jung stated in The Undiscovered Self, the individual who wishes to have an answer to the problem of evil has need first and foremost of self-knowledge. Within the darkness, the ache, and the rupture lies the hidden chance to truly know who you are. Maybe you know that quiet room. The one where the phone doesn't ring, where the silence goes on for so long you can finally hear your own soul speaking. You might call it loneliness. But in reality, you're having a vital meeting with someone who has been waiting patiently for a very long time. You, in Jungian thought, this is the very beginning of what's known as inner alchemy. It's not about avoiding the hurt, but about allowing the hurt to transform you into something new. Much like traditional alchemy aimed to turn lead into gold, this inner process can turn a breakdown into a breakthrough and turn your wounds into portals for your spirit. A woman once wrote in, sharing that she had built a correct life partner, kids, a respectable career, and a family who approved. But one morning, after everyone had left for the day, she sat at her kitchen table and began to sob. It wasn't about anything specific. It was a feeling of emptiness so vast it was terrifying. Soon after, she found herself in a deep depression. But rather than just medicating and forcing herself back to her old routine, she started to write. She documented all the hidden emotions, the forgotten aspirations, the countless times she nodded yes when her entire being screamed no. Reading Jung, she stumbled upon a sentence. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. She wept again, but this time, it was because she felt her pain was finally given permission to exist. If you're reading these words and feel a knot in your chest, if you are moving through a difficult time and wondering, why is this happening to me? Perhaps this is not your final chapter. Perhaps this is your unmaking, the necessary prequel to your true story. In Jung's view, the soul will not be ignored indefinitely. At a certain point, it will demand to be lived completely. And its preferred method of getting your attention is often the sharp touch of suffering. What's remarkable is that Jung never advised people to just get over things or force a positive outlook. He believed real change occurs when we have the courage to sit with ourselves, right in the middle of the mess. Because the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. To look at yourself in your moment of absolute vulnerability is not weakness. It is the very entry point to authentic power. An awakened woman is not a person who is perpetually strong. She is a person who is intimate with the feeling of collapse. She has felt the chill of having no one reach out. She has pleaded for help and been met with nothing. She has given her love to others to the point of her own erasure. But in those solitary nights, she is reforged from the rubble. Not with fury, but with a silent vow. From this point forward, I refuse to abandon myself. Can you recall a time in your life when you were sure you'd reached your lowest point, only to find yourself rising again later? That was not a fluke. That was the sacred alchemical process Jung wrote about. The transformation that starts not with delusion or avoidance, but with the raw acceptance of what is real. In the confusion, in the solitude, in the dark, your soul is learning to declare, I belong to me. It's a great irony that our culture believes a magnetic woman is one who never falters, never weeps, never admits weakness. But it's those who have been shattered, who have dared to keep themselves company in their pain, who hold a healing power that is utterly real. They don't need to convince you with language. Their very presence speaks volumes. No effort to impress is needed, because their spirit has been melted down in the fire and reformed from its very core. As Jung put it, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. The ultimate prize in life isn't being loved by others. It's the journey of becoming your authentic self. If you find yourself now in that gray territory, where the old is gone, but the new isn't clear, don't scramble for the nearest exit. Be still. Feel it all. Write it down. Scream if that's what's needed. Like a master craftsman at a forge, you are shaping your real self. And in that heat, a woman is being born. Not from an ideal, but from her own ashes. You are so near. You might not feel it yet, but a fundamental change is happening within you. This isn't determination. This is the incubation of your own miracle. Number 3, the rise of the whole woman, embodying the integrated feminine. Then, after the hurricane has passed, while the embers are still glowing in her core, a subtle shift begins to take place. This woman stops looking for a savior. She stops hoping someone will arrive to pull her out of the darkness. She is no longer composing lengthy texts to salvage relationships that have already fractured. She starts to do something that once felt unimaginable. She keeps her own company. This isn't a dramatic gesture, but a quiet, internal pivot. It's a movement where the soul stops begging and starts to communicate in its own clear voice. Have you experienced that yet? A morning when you're suddenly indifferent to outside opinions, and your only longing is to be true to your own heart. That is the dawn of a woman rising into her wholeness, a version of herself who no longer lives for applause, but for her own truth. Jung described this as the powerful shift from the persona, our social identity, to the self, the true center of the psyche. When a woman allows these false skins to fall away and returns to her essence, she ceases to be a creation of external pressures. She becomes a self-governing being. She doesn't require love from others to feel valid. She is love, simply by how she chooses to exist. A woman like this has no need to perform strength. She has nothing left to prove. She understands when to use her voice and when to embrace silence. She can be yielding without being a doormat and resolute without being harsh. This is because she has reconciled with both her illumination and her shadow. She is no longer split, no longer in a civil war with herself. In Jung's framework, she is embodying a state of psychic integration, a unified soul, and this is what creates that quiet magnetism that no one can articulate, but everyone around her can sense. Jung's ideas of the anima and animus are particularly helpful for grasping this change. He proposed that every person carries an inner counterpart. Men hold a feminine archetype as anima, while women possess a masculine archetype's animus. When a woman's animus is undeveloped, she often looks to men to provide her with a sense of purpose, agency, or resolve. She might find herself in unbalanced dynamics where the other person serves as a rescuer, a mentor, or the source of her self-worth. But once the animus becomes integrated, she no longer searches for a father figure or a champion. She seeks a true equal. In his work on the phenomenology of the self, Jung noted that the animus is linked to the paternal logos reason, discernment, just as the anima relates to maternal eros, connection, relatedness. This indicates that as a woman develops her animus, she connects with her own capacity for reason, for setting boundaries, and for creating her own path. She learns to trust her own mind, make her own choices, and navigate her own life. She stops needing someone to save her from her own feelings. She has learned to stand firm within them and respond from a place of clear awareness, not from a place of unprocessed pain. I met a woman once who exemplified this. After years in a marriage where she had to make herself smaller to maintain harmony, she finally decided to part ways, not from hatred for her partner, but from a refusal to continue betraying herself. When I asked what empowered her, she answered, "I finally spent enough time with myself that I couldn't stand the thought of abandoning myself anymore." That is the marker of a developed animus. It isn't aggressive or loud. It's a quiet conviction that cannot be swayed. If you are on this path, you might notice that everything in your orbit is beginning to shift. Individuals who once felt integral might now seem distant. Bonds that once seemed vital now feel superficial. Do not be alarmed. This doesn't signal that you've taken a wrong turn. It signals that your own inner frequency has changed. And when a woman begins to operate from a place of deep honesty, anything not built on that same foundation will naturally start to fall away. And here is the most profound part. A woman like this is captivating not because of her appearance or her wit. Her very presence moves people. In her gaze, in her walk, in her silence, she carries the unshakable stillness that only someone who has journeyed through their own depths can own. And there is no way to fake that. Honesty does not need to be loud. It emanates in stillness in the way you hold space for yourself, and as a result, create space for others. Jung once remarked, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries." A complete woman is not someone who has eliminated her frailties or only displays her good sides. She is someone who has learned to hold both her vulnerability and her strength, her deep yearning and her inner peace. Because of this, she no longer lives in the hope of being selected. She lives because she has selected herself. Do you sense a shift happening deep inside of you? It might not have a clear shape yet. But if you've noticed a part of you has quit trying to please, a part that no longer seeks validation to exist, then know that the whole woman inside of you is emerging, not from flawlessness, but from radical self-honesty, not to be loved, but because she has decided to love herself. And maybe that is the kind of person we all secretly long to be near. Not because she is dependent on us, but because she has fully become herself, and that is more than enough. Number 4, the potency of no and authentic magnetism. What makes her so magnetic to everyone? Not all forms of light are blinding. Some women enter a space with no flashy clothing, no booming voice, no visible attempt to capture focus, and still every head in the room turns. She does nothing for effect, yet her very presence shifts the energy of the room. A quiet power radiates from her, a magnetic pull that no one can quite put their finger on. If you observe her, you will realize it's the energy of raw truth. She may not be the most conventionally attractive person there, nor the most accommodating, the most agreeable, or the easiest to win over. She is not auditioning to be liked, and she is utterly unconcerned with being given a stamp of approval. That is precisely what makes her so distinct. Jung never suggested that a woman should disown her natural desire for connection. He simply observed that when being liked becomes more important than being real, we forfeit our own soul. A whole woman has no need to be popular to feel she is enough because, as Jung asked in The Development of Personality, the most critical question a person can face is, what myth am I living? This woman is no longer performing in someone else's story. She is living the narrative her own soul is composing. Have you ever encountered a woman who offers no apology for her feelings? She doesn't conceal her tears, nor does she dilute her joy or her grief. She doesn't recoil when her own voice shakes with emotion, and she isn't afraid if her expression turns firm when it's called for. That is a hallmark of integration. She isn't playing the part of a strong woman. She has genuinely been through her own personal hell and returned. She isn't faking that she's okay. She's been shattered and has reassembled herself. And the lines where she was broken are now the exact places the light pours through. Carl Jung said, "Only the wounded physician heals. The person who can offer true healing is the one who has first tended to their own injuries." And the whole woman is the embodiment of this truth. She does not wield her power to control, but uses her life experience to hold a safe container for others. She has no need to be superior, no desire to compete, no compulsion to prove a point. She does not decline to stand up for herself. She declines to participate because she understands the value of her own life force. She knows the power of no. She establishes clear limits. She refuses to exchange her inner calm just to keep someone else comfortable. She refuses to quiet her inner knowing just to maintain a fragile peace. And critically, she has stopped apologizing for her own depth. She no longer says things like, "I'm sorry, I know I'm overthinking this," or "Forgive me if I made this weird. I'm just sensitive." Those phrases were once her currency for being accepted and loved. But now she sees that her depth isn't a weakness. It is her greatest asset. True magnetism does not come from conforming to another person's checklist. It arises from inner cohesion. When a woman becomes the protector of her own boundaries, the universe begins to reorganize itself to match her. Those who were used to taking advantage of her energy will find themselves on the outside. Connections that were held together by her people, pleasing will naturally dissolve. But in their place, she will begin to attract others who have also done their inner work. People of substance, integrity, and the courage to show up as they truly are. If you are currently learning how to say no, if your hands still shake a little when you try to hold a boundary, then you are coming very close to your own center. You are becoming dangerous in the most beautiful sense. Dangerous to the old systems that required you to be small. Dangerous to the kinds of affection that demanded you ask permission to feel. And most of all, you are becoming irresistibly compelling in a way that can never be faked. Jung wrote in memories, dreams, reflections. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. Clarity doesn't come from seeing yourself reflected in the eyes of others. It comes from having the bravery to look inward and not run away. The woman who captivates everyone isn't trying to capture anyone's attention. She has chosen to meet herself and to remain there. And if you are on this journey, recognize this. Each time you say a firm no, when that is your truth, each time you stop apologizing for an authentic emotion, each time you resist the urge to smooth things over for others, you are embodying that woman. Not everyone will approve. Not everyone will be comfortable with it. But your resonance will find the ones who are meant to hear it. And once you become honest with your own soul, the magnetic pull you exude will require no justification. Number 5, rebuilding your world and your vision. The draw of a truly honest woman isn't just in the quiet grace she possesses, but in the radical transformation occurring throughout her life. Because when a woman dares to enforce her boundaries, dares to turn away from what is no longer true for her, the result isn't merely gaining respect. It is a fundamental rebuilding. Her connections, her lifestyle, and even the core tenets she once saw as unbreakable all begin to re-form around her new center. Have you noticed this? That the moment you begin to live honestly, your entire reality starts to rearrange itself. Initially, this reordering does not feel good. It can be intensely painful. People who were once your inner circle may start to seem like strangers. Bonds that felt foundational now appear flimsy. Friends may not reach out as often. Relatives might comment, "You've changed." And they are correct, but not in the way they imagine. The sense of loss is tangible. Jung was acutely aware of this process. In The Undiscovered Self, he explained, to rest in the comfort zone of the collective opinion is to evade the call of individuation. When you embark on the path of becoming yourself, you can no longer fully reside in the collective you came from. Your spirit is summoning you to a new place, where your integrity is more valuable than your ability to fit in. I recall a guest sharing on our program that after ending a 12-year partnership, she felt like she had been dropped into a barren wasteland. She hadn't just lost her companion, she had also lost their shared friends, her former in-laws, and all the routines that had once structured her days. But in that stark emptiness, she began to notice something she had never been able to hear before, the sound of her own inner guidance. "I'm not scared of being alone anymore," she explained, "because it was in the silence that I finally heard myself for the very first time." And paradoxically, when you cease trying to grasp onto what no longer belongs, you create the space to attract what genuinely does. Not shallow connections, not relationships that require you to shrink yourself, but soul-level allies. Other women who are on the same pilgrimage back to themselves. They don't posture. They don't try to outshine one another. They don't give you glib, easy answers. They bear witness. They are present. They will sit with you while you cry without judgment, and they will celebrate you when you find the courage to voice your truth. Jung gave this principle a name: synchronicity. It's the profound way that life reorganizes itself to mirror your internal state. As you change on the inside, your entire outer perspective begins to shed its skin. You no longer feel that things must be rationally proven to be real. Your intuition becomes sharper. Your dream life becomes more vivid, and your dreams are no longer just random noise. They start to feel like symbols, like coded messages from your own depths. Jung was convinced that dreams are the small, hidden gateways into the deepest, and most secret chamber of the soul. A woman in this phase of awakening starts to understand that true wisdom isn't about having all the answers. It's about learning to listen to what you cannot yet fully grasp. She tunes into her dreams, her body's signals, the strange emotional shifts she feels upon entering a new place or hearing a specific piece of music. And from this data, she begins to navigate by an internal guidance system, not by an external agenda. As she travels deeper, she begins to see the archetypes at play within her. When she feels a surge of creative energy, a passion for life, a deep sensuous connection to the world, maybe the lover archetype is alive in her. When her instinct is to protect and support those around her, the mother is present. When she feels and pulled toward quiet reflection, stepping away from the noise, it's the wise woman offering her counsel. These archetypes cease to be restrictive boxes to fit into. They become a living vocabulary that helps her understand her own inner landscape and find her way forward. Do you feel yourself losing the desire to justify your evolution to others? Have you found yourself beginning to trust an instinct you used to brush aside? If you answered yes, you are very near the center of your own transformation. Do not feel anxious if your old circle no longer gets you. Do not be afraid if you feel out of place in settings that were once your home. The boredom and restlessness you feel with the old way of being is a powerful sign that you are being called towards something much more real. As Jung said, we cannot change anything unless we accept it. Censure doesn't set us free, it holds us down. Transformation doesn't happen by trying to force yourself to be different. It starts with the radical bravery to admit that you have already transformed. From that point of acceptance, everything else starts to reconfigure. Not around what others want from you, but around the unshakable truth of you. A woman remaking her world doesn't need a grand strategy. She begins by saying yes to what feels true for her today, by shifting the energy in her home, by taking a solo walk in the crisp morning air, by writing her dreams in a notebook, by accepting she isn't the same person she once was, and releasing the need for anyone else to approve. This kind of rebuilding isn't a single, violent quake. It is a quiet, steady sequence of small, deliberate, and permanent adjustments. And that is the way she walks into her real life, no longer living on borrowed ideas, no longer trying to fulfill another person's vision. Each step, however uncertain or solitary, is a step into a world where she is completely, unapologetically herself. Number 6, integrating your inner counsel, the lover, the mother, the mystic, the maiden. And so, when a woman finds her own rhythm, no longer running to keep up with the expectations of the crowd, she steps into an even more profound layer of her personal journey. The focus is no longer on escaping what was. It becomes about consciously weaving all the separate threads of herself into a single, vibrant, and coherent whole. This is not about casting off old identities, but about choosing to live like a complete symphony, where every instrument of her being is honored, heard, and allowed to play in harmony. Jung saw this as a crucial step in the process of individuation, the integration of the internal archetypes. A common pitfall for women, not through any fault of their own, but through social conditioning, is to believe they must choose to be just one thing: the devoted mother, the passionate partner, the flawless wife, or the dutiful daughter. They select a single identity, often the one that is most easily validated or socially rewarded, and sideline all the others. But an archetype is not a static role. It is a current of vital energy, ready to be engaged. It is fluid, alive, and designed to coexist with others to create the rich inner world of a complete human being. Within every woman resides a council of archetypes. She may hold the lover sensual, creative, tuned into beauty, and unafraid to pursue pleasure. The mother protective, patient, full of compassion, and a source of safety. The mystic or wise woman deeply intuitive, drawn to reflection, and holding a broad, timeless view. And the maiden is spirited, inquisitive, imaginative, and full of joyful curiosity. These energies are not meant to compete with one another. They are all expressions of the same unified self, I once had a conversation with a woman in her late 50s, the former CEO of a prominent firm. For decades, she had powerfully embodied the archetypes of the mystic and the mother, leading with sharp intellect and logic, while also caring for her professional team and her own children. But a health scare left her feeling depleted and hollow. On a whim, she signed up for a belly dancing class. She started attending life drawing workshops. She began writing her self-loving notes. She told me with a laugh, "I discovered there's still a joyful young girl inside me. That version of me wasn't gone." And it wasn't. Her reawakened lover and maiden archetypes weren't there to overthrow her other roles. They were emerging to enrich her inner world, to help her exist in a more complete and authentic way. Carl Jung was adamant that psychological wholeness doesn't come from amputating the parts of ourselves we don't approve of. It comes from creating a space where all parts can be present without shame and without internal conflict. Genuine maturity isn't about picking a side. It's about learning to hold the tensions of our inner opposites. You are allowed to desire deep sensual connection and also love a quiet evening with a challenging book. You can be a dedicated parent and also fiercely protect your need for solitude where you answer to no one. You can be the life of the party one night and weep quietly to a sad song the next. And most radically, you do not need to apologize for any of it. If you have ever felt confused by your own inner contradictions, take that as a very good sign. It means your inner archetypes are activating, sometimes all at once. Do not feel rushed to pick just one. Instead, begin to listen. One day you might feel a powerful pull to make something beautiful with your hands. That is the lover offering guidance. The next, you might crave deep quiet and ancient wisdom. That is the mystic calling to you. On another day, you might just want to lie on the grass and watch the clouds. That is the maiden. And when someone you care for is hurting, the mother will step forward without any conscious effort. You contain all of these, and you are permitted to be all of them. A woman who is integrating her archetypes stops asking, "Who must I be in order to be loved?" Her new question becomes, "Which part of my spirit is asking to be expressed today?" This question not only liberates her from social programming, it unlocks a flood of creative life force in her work, in her relationships, in the way she communicates and moves through the world. She ceases her efforts to be the perfect woman. She simply becomes a vibrant, untamable expression of life itself, fluid, radiant, and free. Jung wrote a line I have always treasured in memories, dreams, reflections. Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. Being whole does not mean surgically removing the parts we find inconvenient. It means learning how to weave every piece of who we are into a beautiful tapestry. And if you have come this far, just pause here for a second and ask, is there a part of myself I have ignored for far too long? Is there an archetype knocking at my inner door, asking to be lived through me once more? If you hear a yes, then open that door. The path to becoming a complete woman is not a rigid, straight line. It is an improvisational dance between all the parts of your magnificent soul. And you are the one leading. You do not need a green light. You do not need to be flawless. You only need a commitment to honesty and the courage to embody all that you are without apology. That, right there, is true freedom. Perhaps the most challenging and rewarding part of becoming a whole woman isn't about adding anything new, but about bravely shedding everything that was never truly you. All those layers of be polite, or be accommodating, be selfless, be easy to love, were once your survival gear they helped you fit in. But at a certain point, that gear became a cage. And the instant you decide to say, no more, not with anger, but with quiet clarity, is the moment you begin the work of becoming the woman you were meant to be, not the woman others found convenient. You have no obligation to be the woman who is desired by everyone. The simple fact is that the most profoundly loved women are the ones who never sought that role. She just commits to living so honestly that her presence becomes impossible to ignore. And it is then that she begins to call in the right circumstances the right allies, the right kind of love, not as a reward for her performance, but as a reflection of her choice to be herself. There is a unique stillness in the eyes of a woman who knows herself as she gazes into the mirror. She is not there to edit herself for an audience. She is there to simply see herself and to smile, because the person in that reflection is the one she used to only dream of becoming. Not perfect, not free from sorrow, not constantly strong, but true, complete, and no longer asking for the right to exist. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." You cannot reach the most authentic version of yourself by chasing a fantasy of endless positivity. You have to travel through your own shadows. You have to be present with your own pain. You must be willing to touch the very things you try to bury. And it is from that sacred ground that you will finally begin to radiate a light that is not borrowed, but kindled from your own indestructible core. If you are somewhere in the messy middle of this transformation, if you feel unsettled, if doubt and confusion are still your frequent companions, you are not failing. We are part of a generation of women awakening side by side, putting down old inherited weights together, choosing our own souls, not from a place of fear, but from a place of profound love. Each time you honor your truth, each time you hold a boundary, each time you silence your inner critic, you are sending a tiny ripple through the collective unconscious, where thousands of other women are waiting for someone else to show them it's possible. When one woman heals, she doesn't just do it for herself. She does it for her grandmother, for her future daughter, for all the women who came before her, who never had a language for their own experience. She clears a path not only for her own feet, but for all those who will walk after her. Every step you take in the direction of your true self is a lamp lit for someone else. So even if this journey feels intensely personal and lonely, even if you worry you aren't brave enough, please know this: you are not walking this path by yourself. At your back is a great river of women who are also returning to themselves. Before you stands the full and complete version of the woman you are becoming. And in this moment, all you are required to do is to choose yourself. The entire universe will then begin to reform itself to mirror your decision. You were never designed to be small. You were never meant to wait for approval. You are here to live your truth and to live it all the way. Begin today. Begin with you.